as best we see, and we're looking for the planning board's approval tonight for this endorsement.
Very good, short and sweet.
We
So
hope.
I remember vaguely, we did this with the kebab, right?
Yes,
It-
you've done this in a couple of different places. Actually, I think there's another spot on Laurel Lane where you did this.
Okay,
And essentially, the law, the provision states that having two primary uses on a single lot is a larger nonconformity than dimensional nonconformities. So the severing of those two primary uses into two nonconforming dimensional uses is an upgrade of sorts.
Right.
And these lots aren't uncommon for that general area as far as the size.
And in particular, the Mass General Law, Section 81L is the definition section. And by the statute that Adam talked about, it is not considered a subdivision to have this lot divided in such a way. So that's basically what an 81P is. This is not a subdivision.
very good. And I assume it's on sewer?
It is not. It's on private septic. It's a shared septic. It has an approved Title V that was submitted to Jimmy Gariffi probably about a month and a half ago.
Is that our concern?
It is not. He is
Okay.
working with them on that.
So Jim Gareffi's on it. So,
And I mean, if there's anything, it would be in there.
do we get correspondence from?
I mean, he fills out the septic form,
Board of
and there's
Health.
his Board of Health compliance form.
Board of Health
So those are his
compliance.
comments.
Okay, so Board of Health is on it. Technically, when we do A&Rs, we're just looking for lot area and frontage.
Yep.
And this is a special case, not the first time. I don't have anything, we don't have to worry about setbacks or anything, right? Because of the 81L?
But you want to try and make the setbacks as conforming as possible, but yeah, you don't have to get into setbacks.
Okay. Well, unless anybody, any questions? Oh, Amanda's with us?
She is.
I'm here, I don't have anything.
Thank you.
I see the proposed driveway easement listed. Now, where I'm eventually going with this is not thinking about trying to make life easier rather than harder for the applicants in the long run. So I don't want to create the impression that I get that some of the questions I have aren't directly related to A&R, but I hate to see a situation where it gets set up to make life harder later. Does that driveway currently exist?
It does.
Okay.
And that's why we're providing an access easement onto lot number 1 for lot number 2 to use a portion of their lot for access, for the driveway.
So my only question would be, Mr. Allison, if that's, does that potentially run afoul of our shared driveway law? Is that an issue?
This is not new construction, so I don't believe our shared
Great.
driveway would apply.
I would say it's a pre-existing non-conforming.
Super.
And so the division would cover that pre-existing non-conformity, and the common driveway not being located, splitting the lot, as the bylaw says, would fall into the dimensional irregularities.
Great with it. I just didn't want to say, of course, and create a scenario where life was harder later.
Certainly understandable.
Great. I have no questions.
Okay. No?
All good.
Okay, I guess, with no concerns, I guess I'd take a motion.
I would move that we
Endorse.
endorse, thank you, that we endorse the A&R application for 68 Laurel Lane.
Excellent. Is there a second?
Second.
Very good.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? All in favor, it's going to be roll call vote. Mrs. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mr. Wilsmer?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Sign the plan now or at the end of the meeting?
It doesn't look like I have the, oh, do I do? the recording form, so they'll probably sign it at the end of the meeting. You think we can take it tonight?
I can come back, we can have to come back tomorrow, that's not a problem.
Okay, yeah, let's do that.
Thank you. You as well. Excuse me. So we've got a couple of public hearings, but we do have one of our select board members here to go over something that's on our ongoing items. So I think I'll ask that Mr. Jeffries to come up and speak to us on, it's on here somewhere, I know it, Lunenburg Municipal Buildings. And are you going to speak to the environmental support policy as well?
I will not speak to the environmental support policy tonight, but I will speak to the building use concept. So my name is Mike Ray Jeffries. I live at 1170 Massachusetts Avenue. I am the chair of the Lunenburg Select Board. I'm also the chair of the Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee. So a couple months ago, we forwarded some information over to you on some concepts that we were working on. So I just want to publicly kind of explain a little bit what we're here, and hopefully this is a brief discussion. I know you guys have many things on your agenda tonight, and there are people who are waiting behind me who want this probably to be a little quick. So the charge of the history here is, it was about almost 4 years ago now that we created a TCP reuse committee. And the intent at that time was to look at the TC Passios building and figure out how we can maximize the usage to best meet the needs of the community. History on this is that that building was transferred at a town meeting about 5 years ago or so from the school department to the select board, and that was approved by the voters at town meeting. So in the process of the TCP reuse, I think that what we identify were a couple of things. You know, this was happening during the, certainly during the pandemic when all these prices really went through the roof. And so what we were looking at is how we maximize the usage again of that building. We were looking at either a renovation or what it would cost to tear the building down and start it over again. At the time, the numbers that we got roughly were for a renovation roughly about $23 million. And that would and then for a tear down and new build, roughly $30 million. I think the board, we presented this to the voters at town meeting. We did not, I don't recall if we asked for a vote at that time or not. I think we were all understanding that no one's voting for a $30 million building rehabilitation project, especially when there's other buildings that we need to do. So what we did after that town meeting was we kind of regrouped. The select board expanded the charge of the committee, because one of the things that we identified that was a limiting factor was that as we explore the use of the TC Passios building, that we also have this building, Town Hall, we have the Ritter building, we have the Brooks building, all of which are historic buildings at this point, and we didn't have a plan for what we're going to do with those. So what the Municipal Building Design Committee has been doing over the last year or so has been looking at how to repurpose these buildings. And so what we have is a series of concepts that we've come up with. I did forward those to you for your consideration. I want to focus on the hybrid concept. So we also met with the select board. We met with the school committee. They provided feedback as well as numerous requests on social media and public meetings to get public input as well. So I just want to focus on the hybrid concept. So our mission was to come up with kind of three distinct, at least three, but multiple permutations of a plan of what could work. And as we went through this, we identified what we called a hybrid. And that hybrid seemed to be the most appealing. And based on the feedback that we've received, it's the plan that we're going to work off of as we move forward. We know it's not perfect and that there's going to need to be revisions, but I just want to introduce it to you. So the idea is that TC Passios would be utilized, as we're calling it, a transition space. That if we're rehabilitating multiple buildings, we need to have another location for those offices to go to while those buildings are being rehabilitated. And so the idea is that the TC Passios would function as a transition space, and then after the projects are completed, that the final disposition of that building will be as a community center. That community center would end up with the north wing, what's currently the north wing of the building, getting demolished, the central wing of the building also getting demolished. And so what you would see, what would remain, is basically the first portion of that building, where you have the gym where we vote out of, we have the commercial kitchen, we have the cafeteria area, and then the west wing over there. And that west wing would be utilized to have a home for the food pantry, to have a home for And that, again, that's a Lions Club food pantry, to have a home for town clerk storage related to voting, also to have some office related to facilities. And then there's also a desire that in that area that we tear down, that central and north wing, that we would create additional parking to better meet the needs of the sporting events that happen, and also provide some public bathrooms. For Town Hall, this building, the concept is to, let me step back. One of the things that we really looked into in this is we know that there's a lot of emotions attached to two buildings in particular, this building and Ritter Building. I think from a bones perspective, these buildings need a lot of work. They certainly look better on the outside than they are on the inside, and it's not just the finishings you see, it's all the structural supports, it's what holds up the building. So the idea with the idea with Town Hall would be to turn this into a meeting house. And that sticks with the traditional roots of New England, where before town halls, we had meeting houses, in which this room would mostly be the same. We would eliminate what is now the town manager's office, the HR office, to expand this room out. And that on the first floor, that we would convert those office areas basically into 3 meeting rooms. And so this room would function as this town hall would function as the meeting location for all town meetings, and also provide some space for the community to also utilize some of the spaces in this building. We then would look to the Ritter Building, and this is where we know we need to develop some more plans. But looking at the Ritter Building, and the idea would be to turn the Ritter Building itself into the new school admin offices, and then doing an add-on to the Ritter Building of approximately 4,000 square feet. That would be the new town hall. So that way we have new construction really limited to only about 4,000 to 4,500 square feet. And then we are renovating what's currently there to meet the needs of the school department. Now, one of the things the school department has mentioned in terms of why the building would need to get some form of renovation is that when it was a library, this previous use, the heating system was basically open kind of floor format. And in a school office, there's a lot of sensitivities, a lot of information that can't be discussed publicly. And so there's a need to have walls that go to the ceiling and for there to be a ceiling. And right at this time, there are no ceilings in most of the offices, any of the offices inside the Ritter Building. So in order to do that, we would have to change the HVAC system inside the building. And so that then triggers additional repairs in that building. Brooks House, we did not come up with a concept for the Brooks House, but I will advise you of some changes. And then looking at 30 School Street. 30 School Street is currently where the old primary school is. That's going to be demolished this spring. That we would look at that parcel to add additional parking. That based on the village district overlay, that we understand that there can be parking located. It doesn't need to be adjacent to where it needs to be used at if it's here in the village district. Now, there are also going to be some concerns. Now, in that extra west wing, one thing that of the TC Passos, we also were looking for that to be a home for PAC. PAC is a paying tenant, which is good, and there's also a bit of services there that are also paying. So, excuse me. So there's a couple of things that we don't know at this point. We don't know the extent of the hazardous material that's located fully in all these buildings. We do have a pretty good understanding from previous studies that have been done, but we all know that once you go into the building, you always find more stuff. And so there is a bit of an unknown, especially with the Brooks House. We know that the roof at the TC Passos currently needs to get changed. Approximately 20% of the building is unusable because of water damage at this time. We have asbestos tile throughout. So when we have water damage touching asbestos flooring, that room then becomes unusable due to the risk of the airborne carcinogen. And most of those areas that are significantly damaged are in the areas that we would be seeking to get demolished. All right. Those are kind of the key points, and the other things I would add on here is when we met with the select board was really receptive to the idea, the hybrid concept. The school committee had several concerns, and I want to summarize those concerns by saying that there's a lot of demand on athletic fields in town, and one of their concerns was that if we're creating more space over there, is it possible for us to create another athletic field? So that was one of their concerns. Also looking at the Brooks House itself, that building could be utilized for some of the school programs. One of the things that the Municipal Building Design Committee identified in this process was what is currently happening at TC Passios. And we did this presentation at a previous town meeting, but just a summary of what's happening there, a lot. A lot of things that maybe some of it we wouldn't be doing if we didn't have the space available. I think some people in the community have called it Lunenburg's closet, and that the building is functioning almost like a closet for us. But there are some really critical programs that are happening there. The extended day program, this is a vital program that allows parents to have a safe location to bring their kids before school and after school, that many people utilize this program, and that program is paid for by the people who use it. There's also a community link program, and an early education program, and an ACE program. So the ACE program provides support to those 18 through roughly 21, 22-year-olds who graduated high school and met those requirements, but still have developmental needs that basically requires additional services post-graduation. And then there's also some grant-funded services over there with the Early Learning Center, and that's where it's services that are provided to parents, young parents, people who are new learning, how to be parents. I'm not the best person to explain what the Early Learning Center does, but I think the title of it probably says it all. So what's been identified is that the community perceives these to be really critical services. We've identified that when we're looking at rehabilitating space, the current numbers we're talking about are $350 a square foot, roughly. And so when you're talking that type dollar value, and then you're looking at 6,000 square feet, you're in the millions of dollars pretty quickly. And so the Municipal Building Design Committee made the decision that we would ask the schools to absorb these programs, that it would be difficult for us to program this into the current plans because, again, of the remodel or the new build costs, that it would be astronomical. What we've asked is that as they consider as they consider a new renovation for the middle school, that they plan in that project to account for the before school, after school program. So this is a decision that we published and said, look, we can do a lot of things, but what we're struggling with is about, again, 6,000 to 8,000 square feet for after school programs, and the difficulty of selling that to the taxpayers, knowing that space that's, again, only going to benefit a limited, it's critical, but it has a minimal and limited impact in terms of who benefits from it, given the cost. And in that, we also, the schools were very resistant to that idea. What we did was we looked at some of the other communities in the Commonwealth based on MCAS scores, looked at kind of the top tier of schools, and looked at where they have their after-school, before-school program. Because we were aware of the school presented numerous concerns related to kids sharing space, how difficult it is for a child to be in a location for an hour, kind of with looser boundaries, looser rules, and then come school time have to transition to a little bit more of a structured environment, shall we say. So our proposal was for that to go into some of the cafeterias and gyms, but we also had additional questions about capacity. So there are things that we still need to know about. Some of the questions about capacity is that at the former Twin City Baptist School, which is now owned by City United, that before they closed, relatively close to before they closed, they built a new gym. And so the question is that gym available for community use? And if so, is there an agreement that could be had that will help resolve some of the needs for more gym space, which then helps decrease the size of this project? And so that's one of the questions. There's a series of other questions that we have out there. But again, I wanted to give you this brief overview. I'll pause here. I don't have too much more to say unless I'm answering your questions. But I will be using my phone to take some notes based on your feedback and your thoughts.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Feedback and thoughts.
And questions.
Just to note, I'm a member of this group from planning board, so
Yeah.
I'm already heavily involved in the.
I'm just taking a moment to finish my processing.
Yeah.
Everything.
I'm very okay coming back in 2 more weeks and picking up this conversation at that time, if that makes the most sense.
Okay. Does that make sense? Do we want to digest this? This is probably one of your first times seeing most of this, isn't it?
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
I'm going to have questions. I don't fully know what they are yet. Just off the top of my head, one thing I wanted to share before I kind of lose it to the ether is that I very much appreciate you noting how critical it is for the before and after school programs. What I would love for the community to understand is that we talk about these programs as if they only benefit the parents who are using them. But I encourage us to really wrap our minds around the fact that isn't the case. They provide a benefit to the community in a much broader scale. This isn't me pushing back against the idea of the schools absorbing more of the cost and control for that space. But just to really, I want that idea out there that having a place for kids to be before and after school, kids who are of an age that they, by the town's policies, really cannot be home alone. And so for some, that's unambiguous. For some, maybe there's a different definition of what isn't appropriate to be home alone, get off the bus alone. Regardless, there's a set age at which it's fifth grade, I believe, is where in this town you can finally not be physically present outside to get your kid off the bus. That makes having these programs is extremely important for keeping Lunenburg family-friendly for younger families, as well as just creates an environment of supporting these families so there's a longer-term connection to the town.
Yeah, they're access programs.
Yes.
They help make sure that as a member of the community that many people can live here, because without them, they can't.
They're not a program that my family currently uses, but when there were two of us working in Boston, they were critical when we first moved to town for our ability to navigate that kind of particular minefield of care and everything else. And I get this isn't about getting rid of them, but I just want to really put out that it's not just, while we think of it as limiting, as serving, it directly serves a limited set of the community. The effect, I think, is far bigger than we might initially think. I would express, and I have to digest this more, I would express a thought/concern about the schools absorbing more when we're also looking at increasing population in town, when we're looking at developments that could notably increase our school population, where we already have buildings that, to my understanding, are very much at capacity. And this isn't hard critical feedback, this isn't cold feedback, it's more just thought process of how we balance all of these needs effectively. I'm probably going to have more questions if we can come back in a couple of weeks, but those are my initial thoughts I wanted to share.
All right,
Thank you. Since you offered, I assume that you're willing to, so
of course.
that would be excellent. Mrs. Reed, do you have any initial thoughts that you'd like to share?
Initially, I do not. I think coming back to it in a couple weeks would be great. Hopefully, I'm well enough to be there for it physically, but yeah, it's definitely a lot to digest.
Excellent. Well, thank you for that, and thank you. And we'd love to have you back, Nick.
All right, I'll offer kind of a parting kind of commentary. So, one of the things that, one of the things that Lunenburg has never done is built a town hall. We've never built a town hall. Even this building was a former church that was down the street, that was moved to this site, raised, first floor was added. And that was in the 1800s, mid-1800s. The building was built, I believe, 1820, and I think it was brought to this location. You can correct me if I'm wrong. I think it was 1860 or 70 in that time period. Anyway, so the town has never built a town hall, and I think that one of the things that we understand that all municipalities have limited means, and we really need to figure out a solution that meets a lot of needs within the community. We understand we're not going to meet every need. I think that the Municipal Building Design Committee has taken the approach that every service that's currently happening should continue to be able to happen, even if the location changes. And I think overall what we're trying to get to is what's the most cost-effective way that we can continue to use Town Hall, continue to use Ritter Building, continue to use TC Passios, but really the goal is that our staff are out of space. And these buildings are not designed to meet really the staffing needs. And so it's helping posture us towards that. We do understand that all conversations happen within the framework of the emotions of the residents, which is focused on children a lot, and schools. And so, we are working with the school committee, understanding that there is a potential building project coming up at Turkey Hill, that we will try to resolve this first, so that way we can be finite with our numbers, do this as cost effectively as possible, and not have a negative impact on other products that need to come down the line. So thank you, and I will plan to be here in the next couple of weeks.
Very good. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Okay, on to our public hearings. So our first one is Lunenburg Central, 475 Leominster Shirley Road. Do we?
This.
Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Well, thanks. Yourself.
Well, thanks. I was trying to make it there, but I had too many things come up this afternoon. Just as a point of introduction, Bill Hannigan with Hannigan Engineering. We did the engineering work for the Lunenburg Central project at 475 Leominster Shirley Road. With me tonight is John Brennan of the ownership group, along with a representative of Viewpoint Sign and Awning. And tonight, what we're working on is a modification to the site plan approval relative to the final signs that we'll be putting, mainly the monument sign at the entrance. So during the site plan review process, the signage was laid out relative to traffic signage on the property without the final signage of tenant space, dock space per tenant, and the main monument sign that's going to be placed at the front entrance. So what we're doing here with this submittal is adjusting the permit, hopefully, to include the signage as proposed. There have been several documents that were submitted with the application, including the one that's on the screen right now. This one talks about the various locations of where the signs would be, and also looking at each of the signs for what they would be viewed as. And then from there are a few other drawings that show what's going on. But let me turn it over to John Brennan, and he can kind of walk you through the signage that is being proposed.
Thank you, Bill. And it's John Brennan. It's from the ownership group. It's a BP Lunenburg Central LLC. I don't know who, Adam, if you have control of this, if you can go back to the site plan, yeah, that'd be probably the best one to walk you through here. And what Bill said is, this is adding up to what was included on our site plan. If you can remember the site, we have vehicle and truck entries at number 1 in the lower right-hand corner here. All vehicle entrances happen in this driveway. No exits are coming out here. All exits are coming out the driveway to the left. So vehicles and trucks enter here. Trucks, as you come into the site, trucks to the right, go all the way around the building to the back to their dock doors. For passenger vehicles, they'll enter in this driveway, take a quick left, and depending on what tenants they're going to, they'll either park in front here or park along the side of the building. All these wayfinding signs just give directions to truck and vehicle passengers. And probably to note here is the monument sign. We've located that at the front right corner of the building. I think that the side setback on this is 90 feet from the, let me find the numbers. Give me a second here. We've set that sign 90 feet off the side property line and 29 and a half feet off the front of the property line.
And those are the actual distances to the property line, where the setback requirement, I believe, is 25 feet in each location.
Right. Who wants to come in here and give you an overview of the signage, the wayfinding signage within the site, and present to you the monument sign here located at the entrance. Right, open this up to any questions. We have our consultant Jack Floyd from Viewpoint Sign and Awning on the line to answer any technical questions.
Okay. I guess I'll start off with the questions. Logo here, you guys don't have a logo yet? Or,
That's on number 3. That would be a logo for the tenants.
okay.
So as trucks drive around the back of the site, they'll come to number 3, and they'll say, "Okay, I'm here for tenant A. Tenant A is in dock position 1. Tenant B would be in dock position 2." So either would be the tenant logo or the tenant name right there.
Okay. Anybody? Questions?
I'm not, Adam, you may know the answer for this. I'm just not familiar off the top of my head with our sign regulations. Does the monument signing at the front meet our requirements?
It does, and the building commissioner has seen this and had no
Great.
comment.
Okay.
What was,
Go ahead.
what was it, like 69 bays? So are you going to have dock 69? Or is,
It's, I think it's 71, 72 bays.
okay.
It would be listed docks, say 1 through 15, depending on the tenant and the size of the tenant.
Okay. And Adam assures me that everything is conforming, right?
To my understanding.
There might be a better, Adam, if you go to one of the other drawings, I thought that there was a side view that showed where the dock signs would be. Yeah, I guess it doesn't really show. John, didn't we have one of those that had the,
I think this would be it.
I guess if you go back to the plan view to answer that question, if you look at the number 5, okay, so that's where the number 5 on the plan is where the signs 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we're not going to put a sign over every single bay, but dock bay will be owned by tenant, will be leased by tenant A, and that will be located for dock 1, and dock 1 might include 15 bays. So those dock signs are just meant to designate where each of the tenants' loading and unloading bays are located in general. And number 5 in that plan view shows where those signs, numbers 1 through 3, 1, 2, 3, and 4 will
So
go.
you won't have dock 1 through 72.
No,
Dock 1 through 3 or 5, depending on how many tenants you have. And they'll
Right,
be
so-
and each dock will be composed of a series of overhead doors.
correct.
Correct.
Very well explained. Thank you. Mrs. Reed, do you have any questions, comments, concerns?
Not at this time.
Okay. Seems fairly straightforward. The building commissioner has weighed in and given his thumbs up approval.
He has, and he'll have to approve the sign permits when they go to install them.
Okay.
I have no other questions.
No? Mr. No? I guess I'd be ready for a motion then.
I
Wait a
will,
minute, I'm sorry. This is a public hearing. Is there any public comment? Okay.
Did
And
we have to
we
reopen the public hearing?
We have to
within-
close the public hearing.
Oh, were we supposed to, did we make an announcement to open it? Did we? Do we have to do that?
Oh, yeah, we should have, shouldn't we? Can we do it now?
Yeah.
Do we have to?
No.
Okay, no. We
I
missed
mean,
it.
you open the public hearing by beginning it.
Right,
It's properly advertised.
okay. So we should have read this.
Would have been best.
We should
yes.
have read, you're
Okay.
right, you caught, good catch. No public comment? I would accept a motion to close the public hearing.
I would move to close the public hearing. Do we need to specify the public hearing? Can we say close this public
Yeah,
hearing?
just close the
okay.
public.
Close the public hearing.
Is there a second?
Second?
Excellent. Any discussion? All in favor by roll call? Mrs. Reed?
I,
Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mr. Wilsmer?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. So now we get to deliberate, discuss. I don't think we have anything. If we do, please bring it forward.
I just like the signage, and when I looked at the plan, it was really easy for me to follow how everything made sense when you were, like, I kind of mentally drove through it, and it was really pleasant to think it through and go, oh, I see how this works. It was very nice.
Excellent. Then I guess I'd be looking for a motion.
I would, as part of the deliberation, request that any motion incorporates the existing conditions on the approval, and then adds any additional conditions you choose to add or no conditions at all. And that saves having to write a whole new decision that incorporates another 4 pages of conditions.
Are there any additional conditions that you would recommend?
I don't think so. I mean, this is going to be done in conjunction with all of the other construction. The hours should be the same, all the other controls should be the same, but I also don't want to tell you how to condition your approvals.
Very good. I didn't think there needed anything additional.
I would move that we approve the site plan, we approve the modification to site plan approval for the Lunenburg Central Project, 475 Leominster Shirley Road, with,
Existing?
with the current existing conditions and no additional.
Is that good?
Sure.
All right, we're looking for a second then.
Second.
Excellent. Any further discussion? All in favor by roll call vote. Mrs. Reed?
I,
Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mr. Wilsmer?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Excellent. Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you very much.
Great, thank you, appreciate it.
Okay, and so now we have a public hearing notice to read for this.
Yep.
Do you have it?
I do have it.
So we're gonna go ahead and open the public hearing for 1325 Mass Ave.
The Lunenburg Planning Board will hold a public hearing on January 9th, 2023, 6:05 PM, at Town Hall to hear and review applications and amendments to a site plan approval and stormwater permit under Chapter 250, Section 8.4, and Chapter 204 respectively of the Code of Town Lunenburg for a contractor yard, personal improvement building, and office building at 1325 Mass Ave, map 62062, parcel 0003. Owner 1325 Mass Realty Trust, Daniel C. and Jean M. Proctor, trustees. You just keep reading this all of it? Is that the idea? Okay. 1325 Massachusetts Ave, Lunenburg, MA, applicants Daniel and Jean Proctor. 1529 Massachusetts Ave, Lunenburg, MA. Materials are available for viewing at the planning office. 960 Massachusetts Ave, Lunenburg, MA.
Super. Welcome.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to everybody. My name is Greg Roy with Dillison Roy, and I'm representing Dan and Jean Proctor, who are also with me here in the audience this evening, for the property, as you read, at 1325 Massachusetts Ave. We started this process, Dan and Jean purchased the property just in 2000 or just before. So we have a couple of historical permits that I wanted to just sort of give everybody a little bit of a history lesson of where we came from, and then bring it through today, and then give you a presentation of the plan as it is before you this evening. So back in 2000, I guess just shortly before COVID, Dan and Jean approached us. They had purchased the property. They were looking to prep the site by way of pulling off some of the earth material on the site. So we initiated a earth removal permit application, which is administered in Lunenburg by the Select Board. The Select Board did grant that permit. As part of that process, we also filed with your board for stormwater management permit and a site plan approval for that same project, which again, at the time, just included earth removal. The same time, the work also included work within the 100-foot buffer zone to a wetland, so we obtained a order of conditions from the Conservation Commission. And also, because the site is within an ACEC and required a Mass DOT highway access permit, we also obtained filed for and obtained a MEPA certificate. So we filed what's called an environmental notification form, or otherwise known as ENF, and received a certificate without the need for the preparation of what's known as an environmental impact report, which is an EIR. There's a lot of acronyms here. So the MEPA process was done at that time. And last but not least, we also obtained a curb cut access from Mass DOT at that time for the purposes of accessing the site to remove the soil material on the property. That permit was issued in a temporary fashion by Mass DOT because they were interested in understanding the site plan that is now before you this evening before they would issue a permanent curb cut on the site. The applicant has been working over the last, I guess, almost 3 years on the site to remove the material on the site. Every year, the Select Board renews its earth removal permits on a yearly basis, so they have gone each year to work through that process with the Select Board. So they currently still have the earth removal permit in place. Back in the 2000 timeframe, well, back up, the site is zoned commercial, so it's a 5.9 acre commercial piece of property. So the intention has always been to develop it commercially for that purpose. There is quite a bit of material that needed to come off the site. The applicant is in the earth industry, excavation industry, so has obviously some interest in that type of material. But we're here today for sort of the second and final part of the development, which would be to permit the ultimate build-out plans for the commercial site. So before you, as you read, we have before your board this evening a new site plan application and stormwater permit application. Previous to this meeting, we filed for a special permit for the use of the back building. See if I can get this to work. There's 3 buildings proposed on the site, and I'll get a little bit more into the details on that as I go through the presentation, but the use in this building, which is a, quote, defined as a contractor yard by your bylaw, is allowed by special permit from the Zoning Board of Appeals. We have obtained that special permit. That was done back in October timeframe of 2022. That decision is in your packet for your reference. We also obtained from the Zoning Board of Appeals, concurrently with that permit, a dimensional variation for land disturbance within the groundwater protection supply district. So that decision is also within your packet. And I'll get a little bit more detail on that as I go through the presentation. So in addition to the permits that are before your board, the zoning board decisions that we have for this project also will require us to file a notice of project change with the Executive Office of Environmental Affairs, which is the MEPA, the MEPA review organization. We have filed that notice of project change, so that is under review currently by MEPA. We expect a decision on that mid-February. And we have also filed for our permanent curb cut access permits. We filed a curb cut access permits from Mass DOT, and that's also under review. That'll take a month or so at least to resolve with Mass DOT. So I just wanted to give you sort of that history lesson and sort of bring you from where we were almost 3 years ago, where we started almost 3 years ago, to where we are today. So the project, as I mentioned, is a little multifaceted. We have this larger building in the back of the site, which again, the use that is permitted by special permit is a contractor storage yard. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a minute. And we have two sort of more conventional commercial pad sites that we're proposing in the front. This one we're labeling as a personal service establishment. I can't keep this straight, I apologize, too much coffee. That's a personal service establishment, and then this one is just scheduled for as an office building. They're both roughly 5,000 square feet. The contractor storage yard. The applicant intends to construct that building and lease, which would be set up as in a bay format. So there would be an overhead door and a human access door, for lack of a better word, on both the front and the back of each bay, such that the space could be leased. So you could lease it to tenants, and their intention is to have a space for folks like an electrician who, is maybe currently operating out of his garage at his personal residence, but needs a little bit more space to operate his business. So it's space like that. There's not a lot of space like this in this particular geographical area. That's what we're trying to target. There's another use category in the bylaw that I think is called a trade shop. Adam, you can correct me if I'm wrong.
That is correct.
That's actually a by right use in the zone. That's people such as, I'm not sure, Adam, what type of tradesmen would be, like carpenter?
Carpenters, electricians, metal workers,
Right.
some artists would be considered in the trade shop.
Right.
It tends to be less large and exterior
Yeah.
than a contractor's yard.
Yeah.
Where you expect there to be large equipment. It tends to just be
Yeah.
like a cabinet maker would be a tradesman.
Right.
They're crafting within the building.
Right. So we intend to go after those uses, but there was a few people that were, such as like a landscaper or something like that wants to run his business out of this, that could run his business out of this, that prompted us to go the extra step to ask for the special permit use. So we intend to be able to market this to folks like that, but also all the way down to sort of the less, the uses that would fall under the trades type of space, the trade shop type of space. We do not intend to have a open storage of earth materials sales on this site. So a lot of people, when they hear the word contractor yard, they think of a pit like we have at the end of like Powell's Pit down at the end of Lancaster Ave, where we have salt material and sand and loam. We're not proposing a facility like that. The only reason we asked for that special permit was so that we can have, so that we could lease to tenants that would otherwise not fall into the category of the by right use. So I just wanted to be clear about that. We're not intending to have outdoor storage of earth material and sales of bark mulch and that kind of thing. We do include a space for each unit in the back here, a fenced-in area right in there, that would be a spot to park a piece of equipment, or a plumber that wants to yard PVC pipe because he has a business and he wants to have some pipe in his inventory. So we have a space for that. but we do not intend it to be a sales space out there. So I just wanted to make that clear, or to have like what you would normally think about as under a contractor yard. And then the front two spaces, again, would be more of a traditional commercial use that you would think about. Those are both allowed by right in the zoning district. I'll talk a little bit about how we laid the site out. We have two entrances to the site. This would be the primary entrance, of course, for the rear building. And then we have an additional entrance here. Those two entrances would be used by the two front portions of the site. Each use, we've calculated the parking requirements for each use, and we've clustered the parking for each building around those buildings, so that the parking can, although we have interconnectivity between the uses, they can also function more or less as a standalone type use. Or the building, without needing to say someone from, patronizing this building doesn't need to park out here. So that's our intention for how we laid out the site. The property does have access to municipal water and sewer, so we do intend to connect all three of the buildings to municipal water and sewer. I'm going to flip the page here, so bear with me 1 second. This is the grading and drainage plan that we have that's in your packet. 2 years ago, 2.5 years ago, when we permitted the earth removal activity and also received site plan approval from your board, we actually planned for and constructed the stormwater management area on the site. So there is a drainage basin that has already been built on the low part of the site. It's very difficult for me to, you can't really see it from here because the contours are pretty light. But that area has been already constructed and restored. As part of that effort, 2 years ago, we planned for, I think, 77 or 78,000 square feet of future impervious area, anticipating, a development like this that would go in. So our stormwater calculations that you have, that have been presented to your board as part of this process, of course, utilize that basin and then add the upgradient conveyance structures and appurtenances such as swales, sediment forebays, a few deep sump catch basins, some culverts, drain manholes, and the like, to convey the water down into that stormwater basin and treat it through the use of forebays and deep sump catch basins and that kind of thing. But I just wanted to let you know that basin has already been constructed. Let's see, what else? Talked about water and sewer. We provided you with a landscaping and lighting plan. I think I have that too. Hold on 1 second. So, very difficult for me. Hopefully you can see your copy a little bit better than you can see this one, but we're providing and actually it's already been planted, a screen, arborvitae vegetative screen along this property. There's various landscaping, interior landscaping to meet your landscaping parking requirements. The lighting fixtures, you can see these circular photometric contours. We're right in the center is where we're providing or proposing pole pedestal lights. The rest of the lighting would be done from the wall pack units mounted on the buildings. And the balance of the site, really, all of this sort of olive color is green space on the property. So more than 50% of the site will be converted back to lawn and green space. So there's quite a bit of disturbance, of course, on much of the site, but ultimately the property would be restored back to green space surrounding the buildings and in between the parking areas. We have, of course, submitted this this down to Graves Engineering. We have not received peer review comments as of yet. So we, of course, anticipate needing to digest anything that they say and issue comment responses to those. There's been a few comments, I think, issued by some of the town departments. I think fire has weighed in, DPW has weighed in. So there's a few comments there, which we, of course, will work into a future plan set. And of course, we're interested in hearing comments from you folks, and I'm sure those comments from members of the public. I did want to mention that this is on the agenda on the Sewer Commission's agenda for tomorrow evening, so the commission will be discussing that tomorrow night. And it's also, I think tomorrow night as well, on the Historical Commission's agenda. The applicants have requested a demolition permit for the existing house that's on the property. That structure is protected by the demo delay bylaws, so they have a hearing on that with the Historical District tomorrow night as well. So I think that's a good enough overview to start. As I said, I'm sure that you folks have some questions, and we're interested in hearing what those are, and we're happy to take any questions.
Excellent, thank you. Let me mention, I did see, I don't see it on the plans in front of me, but I did look at the electronic email. I appreciate you putting the auto turns on the plan. That was really good. Do you have dimensions from our fire department?
Yeah, and it's funny, I was looking at that, and we usually put the truck template that we used in that analysis on the plan, and we didn't, but we can certainly do that, provide that.
Oh, I thought I saw it on the digital copy I had.
I don't think, we have the
turning movements are on there. I don't
We have
think
the turning
I don't think
movements,
he
but-
notices whether it's a 55 or a 60.
Yeah, we usually put the actual, picture of the truck that has the, the length and the wheelbase and the width and the, what the steering lock angle is and all that stuff.
I don't know what the dimensions of their vehicle is, but I assume you guys talk, and
Yeah,
I assume there's some oversight.
Yes.
Very good, thank you. Okay, so what do we think? Do we want to have comments, or do we want to hear from the public first?
I would like to hear from the public, because I get the impression there's a lot of public comment.
I believe there is. So, we are in receipt of a statement of abutters from Jerry and Dave.
Yeah, I believe that they were going to read that, or someone was going to read that. They asked that that be included in the file, so I had attached it to the file copy.
Sure. So, are Jerry and Dale Erskine?
Yes.
Are they in the audience? Okay, so would you like me to read this, or would you like to read it?
I'll read it.
Okay, very good.
I have a little bit of a scratchy throat, so I may be clearing my throat. Hi, my name is Kathy McWilliams, and I have been asked to present this statement prepared by Dale and Jerry Erskine. They are abutters at 1331 Massachusetts Avenue, directly next to the 1325 Massachusetts Avenue property. How we got to this point. Late in 2019, Mr. Proctor and his wife purchased the Mason property, an old home, a large green hill with pastures for horses, and a large green hill for pastures and horses. I spoke with Dan at Town Hall after the purchase while I was working at the assessor's office. I asked what he was going to do with it, and his response to me was, "Nothing by you, Dale, nothing by you." Then we get to the earth removal. 2.5 years of trucks and loaders slamming, dumping, beeping in reverse, and dust from excavation, and stripping the whole back lot of old-growth trees and removing gravel. Now here we are, about a heavy commercial building, the 240-foot-long contractor storage building and fenced yard nestled right up against 3 existing residential properties. Yes, it is a lot zoned for commercial use. This type of building required a special permit due to the nature and use of this type of building not covered in regulations of a regular commercial use building. The contractors of building, excuse me, according to the zoning board, can have the hours of operation from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. Let me repeat that. 4 a.m. to 11 p.m., 7 days a week. These hours are absolutely not residential friendly, and we feel are excessive, as there are 3 residences abutting this property in the rear and side of this property. This building is to have 10 24-foot bays with multiple independent contractors all doing business, loading, unloading materials, deliveries, pickups, trucks beeping in reverse, starting vehicles early in the AM, moving around stock in the storage area in the rear. When does a board in Lunenburg consider how such a large project will affect the neighbors? Our current and future enjoyment of our properties is at stake here. 3 commercial buildings on 1 lot abutting residences. I ask you, would you like it abutting your properties? For sure, this project will affect our property values in a very negative way. Think of the noise and activity and the actual size of this building, this massive building. This whole project is massive and must be looked into further. This is a new land use of this property. I have some questions. Does the town have any regulation drawn up for this new enterprise? Ordinances need to be studied and written down for owners to adhere to. How does this type of business get any oversight? And what or who oversees the many contractors and their employees' behavior and activities so close to the abutting residences? What agency in the town handles any problems that may occur or come up between the owner, tenants, and abutting residents? To whom do the noise or activity complaints go to? Who will the police be directed to? The tenants or the owner? We ask, why does this building have to be so large? A scaled-down version might be acceptable. Has anyone here on the board walked the 240-foot length to see how huge this building is? See the photo that you have, that Dale provided earlier today. Will there be some sort of solid fencing at the border so as to lessen the visual and sound activity coming from the building? We as a town and abutters deserve to know how this development will look. The plan here shows 3 flat rectangles for buildings. We request an artist rendering of the complex with upright to scale buildings, landscaping, and visuals of how they fit into the land. We deserve this before this moves forward. Other considerations. As the lot sits now, there is a home on a large hill with old growth trees that needs to be excavated to flatten the lot for the new buildings. There is still much construction and earth removal to get to the 3 commercial buildings, the parking lots, etc. How many more yards of material will be excavated to get to the end result? Will this extensive earth removal require a special permit? Are we to be faced with another 2+ years of earth removal that we will have to endure? What about the enjoyment of our property that we meticulously maintain? Please consider this in your decision. We do have concerns with the disturbance within the Zone 3 Water Supply Protection District as well. As the plan shows, there will be vast amounts of gravel, existing trees, and vegetation removed on this lot. It is being replaced by large amounts of impervious surfaces, blacktop driveways, sidewalks, 3 large parking lots, and a paved storage area in rear of the contractor's building, along with 3 large roof surfaces, all impervious and adding to the runoff to the stormwater basin, constructed on the property that borders the wetlands. Has this been considered and addressed? Will the conservation agencies look thoroughly into this? This decision should not be rushed into. And once again, I ask each of you on this board and everyone in this building, how many of you would like it next to your beautiful home and your beautiful property?
Thank you. Is there other public comment? Please?
Mike Rash, 74 Townsend Harbor Road. My main concern is just the building in the rear. I think it's more industrial size, belongs in more of an industrial parkway than a residential neighborhood. You know, it's impeding on our yards, our visual from my kitchen sink, other people's living rooms. It's adding to the traffic. These contractors will be driving by the high school or the primary school during rush hour. The noise ordinance, I think, is it should be more like something like Monday through Friday, 7 to 7, Saturday, Sunday, 10 to 4, something more reasonable. And if it all does go through, well, I think the building in the rear should be downsized. It doesn't fit the characteristics of the neighborhood whatsoever. And if it does go through, I want to request some arborvitae over here, just to block some mature arborvitae, just to block the visual from my kitchen sink. That's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Other public comment? No? All right. So let me say that we can set construction hours, but this board has nothing to do with business operation hours. That is totally the zoning board's appeal. I am amazed that they set it from 4 a.m. to 11 p.m. 7 days a week. Quite honestly, that makes no sense to me either.
Yes, you can mention the lights.
Pole lights?
We had no idea about pole lights either.
That's new. That was
Like
new.
this, downwards. That's what we were told.
Go ahead. Anybody have anything to say?
I heard a lot of understandable citizens' concerns, and my kind of general question is similar to the statement you just made, along the lines of what, and Ann, this is probably for you, for all of this, what are we reviewing here? And where are we in the, I hear environmental concerns, but I'm under the impression those are other agencies, and that's not our purview. But if they are, I mean, these are just, I'm trying to wrap my mind around what's us versus other people, both so we're making a decision in the correct context, and so the concerned citizens can direct their concerns to the appropriate bodies.
A lot of what I heard people concerned about are things that would be handled or are within the zoning board process. And so the hours of operation, the fact that this particular use isn't residential friendly, the concern about the number of bays, why is the building so large? I mean, the building, if it meets the setbacks, they can build it there. That's not it's not larger than or taller than what would be allowed by the bylaw. Those would have been something to be handled through the special permit process or an appeal to that process. The material to be removed, that would be a question that the applicant could answer. What happens now is they have an earth removal permit or had an earth removal permit. I believe they closed it out or are in the process of closing it out. And then once you pull a building permit, removal of material in conjunction with an approved building permit is exempt from requirements of an earth removal permit. So it's permitted under the building code because that removal is site preparation for an approved building. Time frame, again, that would be up to the applicant to answer. Our approvals are good for 2 years. Once you begin construction, that eliminates that 2-year time clock unless you stop and walk away. Conservation doesn't have review of this project at this point. They have issued an order of conditions for the construction of the detention basin because that's within the 100-foot buffer. They did review the calculations for stormwater, which this board will also do through our peer review engineer. The basin that is currently in place is intended to take up to 77 or so thousand square feet of impervious. It appears there are one or two other small swales that are either meant as intermediary containment or infiltration, and our peer review engineer will review the calculations to ensure that the basin is sized appropriately, that the conveyances are also sized and installed or designed appropriately to handle and treat the stormwater runoff. The building being more industrial, the town does not have an aesthetic bylaw on the look or nature of building construction. The uses that are within the building are outlined in the use table. The applicant has obtained a special permit for the contractor yard. The remainder of uses on the site are considered by right. So this process is objectively looking at the physicality of the site, not the uses, once they are by right or the special permit is granted. So this board can do things like one of the abutters requested that there be arborvitae's placed. The applicant can agree to that. If the applicant doesn't want to do that, the board could condition that they be put in. I don't expect that that would be an issue. Things like fencing, the board can require, the applicant can voluntarily. Construction hours are something the board can condition for work on the site and the exterior of the buildings. Interior of the buildings is governed by the building code. There was talk about property value concerns. I don't know that there is any way to adequately predetermine any impacts on property values. We went through this, excuse me. We went through this quite a bit when we were permitting some ground-mounted solar facilities. People came and said, well, our property values are going to suffer because of this, and there is a lot of factors in property value and what the correlation between development and impact on property values isn't directly, it's not a straight line, so there isn't anything that the town has or can do, especially when something is being done within the context of zoning bylaws that permit it. Who oversees the tenants? That would be the property owner. I don't know whether this will be singularly owned and be a rental property, or whether it will be converted into a condo, like a commercial condo of sorts, which would then have a master deed, have a set of rules and regulations associated with it, and would be governed by a condo board or board of directors. If there were noise complaints, the police would handle noise complaints. If the police respond to a noise complaint, they're probably going to speak to the people on site first. If it's a repeated issue and it's a rental property, they may speak to the property owners about an individual tenant or tenants who are acting appropriately or inappropriately. As for the employees of said tenants and their behavior, if they're legal, it's up to the business owner to govern that. I have neighbors that, I have had neighbors who I didn't particularly care for their behavior, but I can't control them. They have property, they do it, so that becomes a civil matter between property owners, and unless it's directly impacting someone's property, it's really just a matter of trying to be good neighbors. What is the rules and regulations for the enterprise? I'm not exactly sure. I assume, or I infer, that they're talking about something sort of like the rules for how one would operate their business at the property. And if they conform to the approval of this board and the approval of the zoning board, it would be up to either the property owner as a leasing agent or rental agent, or the condo association as the overall, or the overarching entity that owns the property to institute and develop those rules and then follow through and enforce them. I think I got. And, you know, with the additional clearing within the aquifer was granted by the zoning board. This board doesn't have any recourse to turn that back. The MIPA process will review some of these things. The curb cut process through DOT will review the safety of the curb cuts. Route 2A is a state-controlled road. It is a high-volume road. The introduction of, I think, if I recall correctly, it's in the 300s daily trips for this site will be absorbed by 2A as almost nothing comparatively. The impacts on the schools, I don't know. Those areas are already congested at pickup and drop-off times, which are generally drive time in the morning and pre-drive time in the afternoon. So I don't want to speculate, but contractors, tradespeople are generally off the job site by 3 o'clock. So they're probably within the primary school and after the middle high school. As far as the office, retail, and personal service locations out front, I imagine those will be more or less interspersed throughout the day in a more consistent manner, and would have maybe higher volume times depending on what type of office or retail or personal service they are.
Thank you for the thorough overview, Adam. I appreciate that. So we are tasked almost exclusively with looking at the physical layout of the site, along with things like our engineer making sure stormwater meets the standards set by our bylaws and by
Correct, and
Mass.
you can look at ways that the physical site can mitigate concerns, light trespass, noise trespass, privacy concerns, those sorts of things. Really anything physical on the site you can look at. The residents do bring up some concerns that are valid and reasonable, and the applicant has the opportunity to hear those concerns and speak with his engineer and consider how they may wish to address some of those concerns, or provide information that in and of itself mitigates some of those concerns, because what one may perceive they will do isn't what is actually going to happen.
Mr. Chair, do you mind if I just share the reasoning behind asking these questions?
No, please do. I'd like to know.
Yeah. I hear a lot of frustration, and it's frustration I understand. I think it's also important when we, and I apologize to those who have come with frustrations to the board tonight, or who are watching at home with concerns. If these are things already well aware of, many people in town are not. We have a limited scope of what we can look at, and it can be nuanced what is within this board or other groups' purviews. And I don't want it to seem that they bring forward 1,000 concerns and we look at 5, not because we don't necessarily care, but because we have a scope for our operations and what we can look at. And thank you for also pointing out some of the other groups and other boards, organizations that also have a hand in this as well.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you.
Sure. Not a problem. Very well said. Mrs. Reed, do you have any input?
Not a ton of input. I think from what I've heard that this is going to be on the docket at a couple other meetings. I think I'd like to see what comes of those meetings and you know, as you said, there's not a ton of things that were mentioned, especially by the public, that we can kind of dive into, other than just personal opinion. So I would definitely like to see the outcomes of those concerns going to the correct groups.
Very good. Mr. Wilsmer, anything?
No, I think my main questions here was mostly about determining like what exactly is our purview here, and I think that's been mostly handled at this point.
Okay, very good. I have some questions for the engineer.
Great.
I guess, so contractors' storage yard, you mentioned overhead doors. Are these going to have vehicular access?
Yeah.
So all 10 of them?
Yes. Those would be, the intention would be to have the ability to drive a vehicle in there, yes.
So I don't recall looking at detail in detail at the details, but do they have the oil traps and grease separators and everything you need to have inside?
Yeah, actually, that'll be a subject of the discussion tomorrow night with the sewer committee, but we definitely will need to have floor drains and an oil water separator for that. We're discussing sort of the specifics of physically how we're going to do that for all the bays, but yes, they'll have all that.
Okay. And then how about the open fenced-in storage? What is that, a 6-foot fence, 10-foot fence? Are they caged in?
One time. Can't remember.
See the engineer looking for help. I'm Danny Proctor, 1529 Mass Ave. So 6-foot high chain link with privacy slats is our intention on the chain link fence.
Okay.
Each one would have obviously a gate that would be lockable by the tenant that would own that particular one.
Sure, but
24 feet wide, 30 feet deep. So they would match each bay.
and then open on top.
That's correct. Yep.
Would you object to putting that same fence along the residential properties?
So I'm not a big believer in fences, just because I know Mr. Rash spoke about arborvitaes. I would much rather do natural type plantings along that, the property lines, rather than fence. I just think they're ugly, and over the years, we lose branches, they fall on them, they get kinks in them, the vines grow up in them. There's a lot of maintenance to them where I just feel like arborvitaes, provide a better natural border. I did want to just make one comment about that. The abutter, Bonnie and Mark, they live the first house on the north side of the property. I spoke to them a while ago. We walked the property, and then I spoke to her again today. They could not make the meeting, but she asked if I could extend that elevated berm that we did as part of the earth removal. And she wants me to get some loom on the backside of it so she can plant wildflowers on it. Because she has that's correct right there, so they showed that on that plan. And again, like Mr. Rash said, I certainly don't have a problem planting arborvitaes along that side.
Okay.
Yep.
So it looks like you might run into some issues.
We have to talk to you personally about borders and...
Yeah, I know you like white pines rather than arborvitaes, so if you wanted white
No,
pines
I'm just
as well.
talking, can we get more? I mean, we don't...
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Oh, all right, that's,
Yeah.
I just want to know how
No,
we
that's
can
fine.
go about...
Yeah, no, that's fine. 582-7211, that's my phone, you can call me anytime.
Okay, yeah.
My cell phone's 978-833-7173.
You'll be getting calls.
Brave man.
And just so you know, when you're trespassing on my property, if I drive in, you don't have to walk away. You can stop and talk to me while you're trespassing on the property.
Okay. So the communication needs to come through the board.
Yep,
So-
no, that's fine, but
That's
I
fine.
certainly can
That-
meet with them on the
and-
site. I don't have a
And I
problem with
certainly
that.
would encourage some discussions, some back and forth discussions, to address some of these concerns. You're going to have a problem with your proposed sediment forebay to extend that berm all the way. So would you be object to doing any of this earthwork on the abutting property, I guess, to have a better outcome?
Go ahead, I'm sorry, I'm not sure which one you're talking about.
Yeah, I probably was a little too liberal with where we probably won't go all the way down into the basin, but we're gonna extend this down. So actually, I think we've already extended it on here. This grading that we're proposing is actually an extension to what we have already built on the site, if that makes sense.
Okay, I see, yep, it is.
We're not gonna go all the way, obviously, we're not proposing to fill in the basin that was built, but.
Yeah, because it looks like it ends about.
Looks like you've gone about
10
30 or 40
10 or
feet
20
further.
feet.
Right,
Yeah.
so we're proposing to extend that down. And then we have not shown, but we can show additional plantings in that area for sure.
And then, so as Adam had mentioned before, we have done work with the solar installations, and there was a fund put together for plantings on abutting properties. Is that something that you might be open to? So it was, what it
sure I
was,
know
was,
what you mean, yeah.
what it was after the construction, there was a certain amount of money that was dedicated in a fund to plant trees on abutting properties to limit the view. Correct me if I'm wrong.
That's.
That's
You're
what I-
talking with some of those ground-mounted solar fields.
Yeah, it was, I think it was $50,000 or $100,000 that they put in, and is controlled by a third party, that abutters can request to fill in gaps in the live screening that's there.
But that was like 15 abutters? There was a lot of
It was
abutters there.
yeah, and it was also a 50-acre property.
And I'm only suggesting this because
$6 million solar site or something, so.
I'm only suggesting because it may impact your site design to do the buffering as they would like it and as you may like it. I just want to remain open and flexible to options, as there is considerable.
Yeah, I mean, if I plant a good row of arborvitae's, I just feel like I've satisfied their concerns. You know, they have property, most of the abutters' properties, honestly, are very, very vegetated. So, just what I plant, I just feel like will be adequate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now that we have the applicant in front of us, any questions?
I do have a couple. The freestanding lights, there isn't a height in your detail?
Yeah, I believe there is. It's like 12 foot high.
Okay, I
Yeah,
must
so-
have just
So they're
missed it.
basically 12 foot high.
Okay.
And they drop
And
down.
they're LEDs?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I want to go.
Yeah, rad lighting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're pole lights. They're going to be mounted on a pole, but they're dark sky compliant. We're not proposing upward lights here. That's obviously not compliant with your bylaw, so we're proposing downward facing lights. The lights on the site proposed are downward facing lights.
Very good. And I guess to speak to the reduction in density that was mentioned, how flexible, if at all, are you on reducing this size?
As far as the reduction in what? I'm sorry.
The footprint, I guess the 250-foot, 240-foot building, I mean, we have no authority to.
Well, the big thing with the size of the building is, you know, at first I explored the option of like 3 buildings, okay? 3 5,000 square foot buildings. Now, obviously, you have, you know, walls and foundation expenses, you have different electrical, you know, supply issues, you have turning radius for the fire trucks like we talked about, all that type of stuff. So this is the most economical building, just because it's the bigger the building, the square footage cost comes down. Oh.
Okay. Now, as far as the nature of the uses, they're approved they got a special permit for the contractor storage yard.
Correct.
Now, and it's a by right use for the trades?
Correct.
So what is not included in either one of those is like air tools? Can you work on your automobile? Can you have like an auto?
No,
shop?
auto repair is its own use, and that's a special permit in and of itself. Now, if you're a landscaper and you are fixing your lawnmower, that's not auto repair, that's an accessory to your contractor yard.
And if you've got an air compressor on your truck, you could be using air tools.
In theory.
Right.
It would not be like a small engine shop, that's a repair shop, and so it would be repair of tools associated with the contractor yard as an accessory to, not someone there all day repairing
Right. I
tools.
understand.
Now, that doesn't mean that somebody doesn't own a bunch of tools and they have a bunch that break and they are fixing them regularly, but it's not like you're gonna have people dropping tools off. It wouldn't be like the old Grand Rental Station where they also may have done repair of snow blowers and lawn mowers and that kind of stuff, or the guy who used to be down on Mass Ave.
How do you know that?
It's not a permitted use.
I'm sorry, because this is a televised public meeting, if you want to speak, you do have to come up to the microphone. It's okay, it's not a problem, but I encourage you to do so. Well, we're certainly not going to make a decision tonight, and we don't have a review engineer, so this is definitely going to be continued. What else? Anything else?
I don't think at this time I want to see what Graves says and kind of process everything myself.
Okay. Tim, anything?
No, nothing that I'm able to articulate at the moment.
Amanda, anything?
I agree with Mr. Brenner. I want to see not only what Graves says, but also what comes of the other meetings for sure.
Okay. Do either one of you have anything?
Is there any indication, Adam, I know you.
I didn't get in touch with Jeff,
okay.
but I'm trying to follow up with him because I need something else from him, so.
We'd certainly have one in 2 weeks, though.
Oh, I would expect you'd have it for the next meeting, yes.
Yeah, so I mean,
That's 3 weeks.
well, I think it's 2, isn't it, 23rd?
Oh, I'm sorry,
think
yeah,
you-
I keep
when I
think-
talked
I
to you-
keep thinking it's the end of the month.
When I
Yes,
talked
it
to you
is 2
earlier, I'm like,
weeks.
wait a minute. The next meeting after that.
The February meeting is
Yeah.
3 weeks. Yeah, I would expect we would have it for the next meeting.
Okay. We certainly were under no,
Thank you.
no thoughts that you'd be doing anything other than continuing this evening. So happy to do that. We certainly got, feedback from the abutters, which we'll review. And we're anxious to see the peer review comments as well. So it sounds like that is the best course of action. It would be to continue for a couple weeks,
Excellent.
if you're amenable to that.
Excellent. And once again, I'm going to encourage anybody that has anything else that they'd like to say, please come up and speak.
Mr. and Mrs. Erskine have once again asked that they could have an artist rendering of all of this, please.
Isn't this?
No, that's I think, a spec building that she pulled off of the Morton website.
Is this going to be a spec building?
Ask him.
Is this going to be a Morton building? Is this going to be like a pre-ordered?
Yes, it may not be the Morton Company, but it's going to be that type of building.
So how did we handle this with Il Forno? They said Morton building and they got it from Morton? Is that what it was?
Yeah, they came with a rendering.
Okay. So it's not an unusual ask? And Il
It's
Forno-
one of the requirements of the site, of your rules and regs for site plan is a rendering of the site
Oh, beautiful.
from multiple angles to see the buildings.
Did they make a request? Architectural elevations is the only thing that, well, it's not even requested, it's just not included. Is that something you guys are gonna provide?
A rendering of the building?
Yep.
Is that what you're asking?
I believe so. All-
Yeah,
all
no,
three-
we can definitely do that.
All three
Yeah, I
buildings?
mean, if it's not a Morton building, it might be a Kirby building. You know, there's 3 or 4 different companies that build steel buildings.
Right.
You know, so it just, at this point, we're just pricing them out.
Sure.
You know, unfortunately, the supply chain is, you know, like you gotta look in a crystal ball and
Everything's
see what you can build, you know, a year from now type of thing. But, so the original was the Morton company. We actually put a deposit on the Morton building just because we were trying to lock pricing in and stuff, so.
Okay. Very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
So apparently they will be providing that. Please come up.
Dale Erskine from next door. Just checking, I want an artist rendering, or I think the town needs to see what this project is gonna look like from the road, say, the 2 buildings, the Morton building, how it's sitting in there and how it's placed. Is that, I don't think that's too much to ask. just
Well,
that-
we do require that they give us renderings of the buildings, but we don't necessarily have a requirement for a site rendering, do we?
I don't know.
Looking at the back, the hills, how it's gonna sit and what we're gonna look at for like the roof, we're gonna be looking at like a span of a roof that's just.
Profile.
A what?
We call it a profile.
A profile, yeah.
There were 2 profiles submitted. No, they weren't profiles, they were cross-sections, I'm sorry. Of the site.
Throwing stuff down there?
Where were the cross-sections?
I have to look and see what your regs say.
I think we just say buildings, I don't think we say site. But I may be wrong, would not be the first. So there's a cross-section A and a cross-section B. And these are on the previously submitted plans from 2020, that they have 2 cross-sections.
I think what she would like is like a planimetric that shows sort of architectural rendering of how the entire site will look.
And I'm not sure that that's entirely outside of appropriate, given the density and the intensity proposed.
Yeah, it does just say architectural elevations with proposed facade material, perspective views that demonstrate the project in relation to surrounding parcels and street, so.
Oh, it does say
Yeah.
that? Oh, okay.
And floor plans.
Beautiful. So certainly looking from the road. And so the abutters to the north, are you elevated above this site so that you can see right down into it?
We're on east. We're on the east.
Okay.
Right in the middle.
So you are elevated as well?
Yes.
Screening's not going to do a lot. Well, it depends.
Well, it does depend, because sometimes screening can do more from an elevated perspective, because it's at your eye level, so you're looking, and you're looking into screening, and everything is down below. So the elevation difference between the...
No, it isn't. The roof. The roof.
Okay, if you would not interrupt,
I'm sorry.
and if you would like to speak, please come to the microphone. Sometimes what will happen is if you have screening at your eye level, and you're looking out at the screening, you're not seeing stuff rise above the screening because of the elevation change, that as you would when you're on the same level. There are certain instances where that is different, depending on the height of the building, depending on the fixtures on the roof, depending on the screening. The difference in elevation is it's about 14 feet from the parking level to the top of the hill to the east. That was why I asked about the pole lights. They're 12 feet tall, so they're shorter than that hill. So the chance of light trespass is reduced. And then you add in the down-facing dark sky compliant, you're looking at a lower halo. That doesn't mean you won't see any light. The roof elevation and the impact on that from a higher elevation is going to be variable depending where you are.
Which was, to that point, which was why I was recommending some of the screening be placed on the abutting properties rather than the locus,
But they do have I think it's 20 feet from the top of their cut to the property line, which is generally enough to place screening within. I think our screening requirements are only like 5 or 8 feet. So that 20 feet gives enough room. And with 20 feet, you can actually do some staggering and you can create a more dynamic screen than just a row.
Right. Okay, before we continue, is there any further public or applicant comments? We've been requested to continue to the next...
Which is the 23rd.
So I guess we need to... Do we need a motion to continue?
Yes.
We do. Motion to continue to a date specific, time too.
I would move to continue the hearing for 1325 Mass Ave to a date specific, January 23rd at 6:05 PM.
Is there a second?
Yeah, a second.
Excellent. Any further discussion about continuing? All in favor by roll call? Mrs. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mr. Wilsmer?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Thank you, folks, and we will see you into the next round.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Plenty of time, huh? Okay. So the rest of it is just housekeeping. Give it a minute, I guess. Comprehensive permit, you got anything on the permit?
Nope. They, if I recall correctly, and it's been a whirlwind of a couple of weeks, month, they have retained both consultants for peer review, general engineering and traffic. The traffic engineer has submitted their initial comments. I think the applicant's engineer has responded, and they're due to meet this coming week, 2 days. In 2 days, I think the traffic engineer has stated he won't have a return review. If I recall correctly, the applicant's attorney indicated they would not be funding the engineering peer review at this time until the zoning board made a determination on whether they were going to or felt that they could waive the water and sewer requirements. So I think there was some discussion about that at the last meeting, but that it's sort of in a status quo right now. They're trying to move through determining who and what can and will determine the water and sewer. And I know that the sewer commission met with the applicant and forwarded back to the zoning board their general comments regarding where they'd like to see the connection and what some of the complicating factors of any connection might be, and indicating the necessity for the fees to be not waived based on contractual obligations that the town has through their intermunicipal agreements.
So has the town to date received anything more than the initial $1,000 application?
They received the traffic peer review fees. And I'm not sure if they've received any additional application fees.
Okay. All right. That's really not in our wheelhouse anyway, but I appreciate you updating us. So we've got board discussions. Master Plan RFP.
It's out, we're waiting for responses.
Have we received, how long has it been out?
It went out before Christmas. And initially, we had talked about having it come back before the end of the year and decided to continue it into next week to provide folks the opportunity to respond and not be jammed up in the Christmas, New Year.
Okay. Should we discuss applicants at a public meeting?
Yeah, well, so there's a ranking criteria, and the finalists, I think we said top 3 will be interviewed by the board.
Oh, I guess I was wondering how many.
I haven't spoken to the assistant town manager to find out how many people have responded.
Okay.
I know there was some interest in receiving the bid package. Who has returned it, I'm not sure yet.
Okay. So there was previously expressed interest?
Yes.
Good. Good. Woo, here we go. Driveways and entrances. Section 250, 6.4, driveways and entrances. And I believe the guiding force for that was the shared driveways?
It is.
And we had been waiting to have a full board, and we technically have a full board. We physically don't usually, but I was excited to hear that that's kind of a little bit your forte, right away at least.
Yeah, I spent some time.
Okay. Have you had opportunity to review our section 250, 6.4 on driveways and entrances?
I have not at this point.
And I don't know that I have the material in the drive. I can make sure it gets in there tomorrow. And so if you want to continue that on to the next meeting, I don't think we have a heavy lift.
Okay.
I think we just have the 1325 project.
Okay. So,
Mr. Chair, if I
yes,
may.
please.
I would if we're going to look at it, I would appreciate, and it sounds like we're heading that direction anyway, that if we're going, because this kind of is frequently on our agenda, if we're thinking this is the time we're going to really do a deeper dive, I would love to know ahead of time, because I reviewed it months ago and now it's
Okay.
no longer in the forefront of my brain. I'd love the opportunity, so if
Sure.
we're looking for that next meeting, that's great, but either way.
So the continued hearing from tonight, is there anything else on our agenda for the second?
Not currently.
Okay. So I think that we should try to plan on having a deeper dive. And then, Amanda, do you have any input on that right now? I was just going to give a little bit of history.
I agree. I definitely need a refresher. I know I have the paperwork somewhere in a pile, but I definitely would like to reread it.
Okay, very good. So does that work for you next meeting to have a deeper dive into that? Amanda?
Yes, that's fine.
Excellent.
So I think what I'll probably do is with the OneDrive, something like the driveways and entrances, I'll create a folder just for that material so that whatever meeting we choose to discuss it at, it's separate.
Perfect.
And there'll also be a folder for each meeting that will have the specific agenda stuff that's not continuing items, ongoing items, that kind of stuff. So when we get to master plan, that will have its own folder. So it will constantly be there, and we won't have to continue to duplicate it, and you'll have the ability to access it easily.
And we have access to OneDrive via our Microsoft
Correct.
login
Yes.
from any machine now.
Correct.
Great.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Does that mean that we can add and or delete from?
No, you can view.
Remotely?
You can't edit.
Okay.
And it has to do with the license level that they purchased for the boards and committees. So if there's something that you're like, I really want to work on this, let me know, and I'll send you a copy that you can
You can
noodle
add-
around with.
You can add and delete.
I can, yes, yeah.
Perfect. Yeah, so we've had a number of instances recently, well, we get A&Rs and we tell them about, common driveways, and then they come back with the common driveway and it's not what we told them, and, and I think it might be a little bit more restrictive than it needs to be. It only allows for 2.
It allows for 2, it requires the property line to be split, and if the property line isn't split, it allows the planning board and the building commissioner to assign an alternate location if they both agree that it's reasonable. I think some of what we've talked about and some of what's been said is that it doesn't necessarily serve the purpose that common driveways often do, which is reducing pavement, reducing intrusions into the right-of-way for access, allowing safety, and allowing a little bit more commonality in access. So some of what you'll see when you look at it is other communities that mostly do it by special permit. They do it generally between 3 and 6 houses, and it tends to be a bit more robust in having requirements on the construction methods, the size, the legal protections, whether it's easement or otherwise, whereas ours just says, yeah, you can do it, and you can serve 2 houses, and that's pretty much all it says. And so we run into a lot of issues, and we've had some issues over the years where they've been put in and they didn't have an easement, and others where the board's approved alternate locations and they do have an easement. And so my general thought is that I think if we went up to 5, but required them all to have independent frontage that could support a driveway, you eliminate some of the concerns people have had where, oh, well, if we let people do common driveways, land that couldn't get developed before is now getting developed, and we're going to cause all sorts of impacts. So you create a developable lot that you could independently construct, but you then look at how you implement a common driveway to allow people to have maybe a smaller pocket community, or you allow for less intrusion into the environment, the retention of trees, the limitation of stormwater, those kind of things.
Now, we had talked before, and I don't know how fleeting it was, but we had spoken before of something about cluster development. And that's kind of what this allows for, but on a single-family individual.
Yeah, I mean, we have cluster development. Our open space bylaw could probably use some work. It's probably, it could be done by right and require traditional development by special permit in instances where people want to do that. That's sort of the model the state's moving towards. And what that does is it requires preservation. Our open space subdivision doesn't save people a lot of land on lots because it goes from 1 acre to 3/4 of an acre, or it goes from 2 acres to 1.5 acres. And I think a lot of that is probably facilitated by the fact that 70% of our community is served by septic. And if you dive below 1 acre, you start getting into nitrogen concerns with septic, and you limit the amount of bedrooms you can have. So you're essentially either doing it in sewered areas, or you're looking at gang septic systems or mini treatment plants or those kind of things, which A, are costly, and B, some people don't want to get into.
Gang septic system being just everyone feeds into one bigger unit?
Yes, yeah. And what happens is once you crest 10,000 gallons, you eliminate the local involvement, and the DEP is the issuing authority for permitting. And so you get into the state permitting process, which again, developers can navigate, and it's not easy, but it's not scary for somebody who's building something of that level. But the long-term maintenance and the level of management of it changes. And so if you're doing single-family homes, you get into probably an association, you get into having people who are paying additional fees, having to self-manage, that kind of thing. We have a few of them in town. One of them has had some problems, mostly due to they hired somebody who was probably not as professional, as above board as they could or should have been.
The person who was indicted on 57 counts?
Maybe.
Okay.
So ultimately, it was fine for them, but I think they had a scare, and I think there were some costs associated with it, because the levels maybe weren't where they were supposed to be. There was some maintenance that needed to be done that wasn't being done because it wasn't adequately being monitored. So consumers can tend to be cautious about that. Developers might not want to deal with it because, hey, if I can just bang a septic system in, I get one guy, he's just plowing through, dropping tanks and fields. But, maybe that's not a bad thing.
Okay. That was a little bit of a digression, but, excuse me. But that just gives you a little bit of background. My biggest contention was that the way I read it and the way I understood the other members to read it was that it says to split the property line. And what we've been told by the decision of the building inspector is that, well, at the frontage, it needs to split the property line and that's it. That's what we were told. And I think you said something about the planning board and the zoning and the building official
Yes.
working together.
Well, they each need to make an independent determination that an alternate location is acceptable if it doesn't split the property line.
Okay. So anyways, there's things to look at, and my main concern is if it doesn't split the property line for the entirety of the sharedness of it, then that leaves one or another party available to not be plowing it, not have maintenance requirements, not have, expense, the obligation to pay for the maintenance and upkeep of it. And I don't think we have a lot of teeth as far as
Requiring easements? No.
Right.
No, we don't. Whereas if you're doing it by special permit or it's codified in the common driveway provision, you have a lot more ability to go back and say, well, you got to do it now.
And I suspect that we're going to be seeing more and more reduced frontage lots.
Yes.
That's just my expectation.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a lot of land out there, and the ability for frontage to be gained on those for the lots that they are, I think, is going down. And I think with the volatility of the market since 2008, I have noticed that developers are less keen to build conventional subdivisions that require roadway, because the investment in design and construction before you start putting a single house in is hundreds of thousands of dollars, if not $1 million, and you're 18 months out from when you gain site control to when you're starting your first house. So you're 24 months out before you've sold a house. You do an A&R, you've got a house up in 6-8 months. And so you're able to catch that hot market, and you're not caught $1 million deep in land that you can't do anything with at that point. And I think that's where a lot of people lost a lot in the 08 through 11 crash. There was a lot of good developers who were land rich and couldn't maintain.
All right, and another bit just for Tim. You can vote yea or nay, or you can abstain on minutes, regardless of you were at the meeting.
Okay.
So our next thing is minutes approval. You weren't at either one of these. You are able to vote in the affirmative or the negative, or just abstain.
Sure.
Either way, Marjorie does all the minutes, right?
He was at the 12.
Mr. Chair, if I
12.
may, yeah. Tim was at Mr. Wilson.
Sure, I
at
was the one on the remote. You're right.
Yeah.
You're right, and you did a great job. So anyways, that's what we're up to. I would accept a motion to approve. We can do it en masse. We just need to specify the dates.
I would move to approve the minutes for our meetings on December 6th, 2022, as well as December 12th, 2022.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Excellent.
I thought you were going to get them all this meeting since she
Yeah,
wasn't
right.
here.
I snuck in there.
There you go. Good job. All in favor by roll call vote. Mrs. Reed,
Aye.
Mr. Brenner,
Aye.
Mr. Wilsmer,
Aye.
and an aye for myself. The minutes are approved. Committee reports. Open space. We've been having a hard time getting quorum. I believe we're meeting the 11th, which is a couple days, I think Wednesday.
That's Wednesday, yep.
So there's no report there. Lunenburg Municipal Building Design Committee, we haven't met, but we just spoke with the chair of that group earlier in this meeting. So again, there's no report, but I believe we're trying to get at least one, maybe two meetings this month. The Agricultural Commission, we have not met since our last meeting. We meet next Thursday. Capital Planning.
We have met, I believe, twice since our last meeting. Once was the standard kind of end run. Everyone gives their rankings. We talk about it, plug them in, kind of average where the numbers are, use that as the ranking. Because some items were removed or split on the from our initial list, that led to some discrepancies in how people were ranking, because you might be ranking something that eventually got pulled. So we kind of adjusted numbers on the fly. That led to Mr. Alonso calling a second meeting for December 28th, just to get all of our to encourage us to get all of our numbers really just truly sequential, so future people reviewing how the process worked can see it matching the same way it's functioned other years. No big deal. That happened. Everything has been sent on to the town manager. And so that process is done, aside from kind of the retrospective meeting coming up later this year, as well as looking at anything we may want to change for next year.
Super. Economic Development Committee.
Oh, that is also me. Yeah, that meeting was scheduled for December 22nd, as may surprise no one who's tried being in town meetings that close to the Christmas holiday. Quorum was not reached, and the meeting did not happen.
Very good. Stormwater Task Force.
We have not met since our last meeting.
Okay. MRPC.
Yes, we did meet last week, I think. I think there's something on our agenda under director's items, so I don't know if we want to discuss that later or now. Or
You can give that.
Okay, so basically, they talked about augmentation funds, which is basically more money for the towns in terms of like offering grant writing options. And, you know, towns can submit proposals for help with grant writing. So, yeah, they just have some extra money available. I know, Adam, there was some literature sent to the office, so I don't know if you have more info.
I have the same info that you all got in your email, which is just the calls for proposal. I mean, if you guys just want to go over this now, essentially, it's the DLTA program. They're looking for MBA communities for technical assistance. We already have a contract with them that the state is paying for them to do that for us. So that doesn't help planning ahead for housing, planning ahead for growth, I would say both of those are going to fall within our master plan that we have an RFP out for. So I think this would be a duplication of effort. Supporting the community compact, including regionalization. The community compact is something that former Governor Baker and former Lieutenant Governor Polito had introduced. It was a best practices, technical assistance of sorts for various local issues that towns would deal with. So I, in general, that usually is something that falls within the town manager's purview, because a lot of it is financial or digital security or management of the town sort of thing. I don't know that there's anything that she is particularly looking for in support for the Housing Choice Initiative. I would say that this is something that we're not going to pursue. Housing Choice is, the town would use town meeting to adopt this portion of the bylaw, which would permit lowered voting quantums for zoning changes that increase and introduce multifamily and mixed-use housing. I'm not opposed to those type of things. I think there's a lot of good that comes from them. I think that they serve communities well. I don't think this community is supportive of those styles of housing and development, especially at a lower quantum, because it requires you to adopt them by right.
Now, are you talking about lower quantum being, instead of 2/3, it's
51%.
Oh, wow, okay.
So it makes creating multifamily housing by right much easier for towns to implement.
Of course it does.
So, again, is there a benefit to that? Yes. Is there a benefit to that in a bedroom community where 85% or more of our taxes are rendered from single-family homes? I don't know. And I know that as the one who'd stand up in front of town meeting, I don't feel like that's a winning proposal.
Today's a good day to talk about taxes, because we just got our bills.
So I don't know, I mean, you have the material. They're due to MRPC after our next meeting, so if you guys want to review this, and if there's something that tickles you or jumps out at you and you want to talk about putting something together, I'm happy to do that. I don't expect us to really bang out ideas tonight, but much like the discussion with Mr. Jeffries, if you want to come back next meeting and you have something that you've ruminated on and feels good, just let me know.
Very good. And I probably said it before, but I want to remind you to speak up if you don't understand or something doesn't make sense, or do we talk about something, please ask. Yeah. We just talked about town meeting. I don't know how familiar you are with town meeting.
Not particularly.
Okay. So when the warrant lists articles that we vote on, and I think all of them except for zoning articles are majority, aren't they?
No. Some financial articles are 9/10. Zoning is 2/3. Non-zoning bylaws are a majority. There's other financial articles that are 2/3.
Okay.
So there's a voting quantum attached with it based on the general laws or town meeting times. And I talk a lot, so if I talk too much, just tell me to shut up or ask a question. And if as we get to town meeting, if you want to sit down and talk about it, I'm happy to run you through it. I know the moderator would be happy to do that too. Just let me know anytime you have questions.
Okay.
All right, so we've talked about the director's item in DLTA, and we've gotten the MRPC. Will you finish with the MRPC, Amanda?
Yes, I'm done with that.
All right, well, you're up next for the JTC.
We have not met yet. We meet on Wednesday.
Very good.
Big meeting day on Wednesday.
Meeting schedule, 6 p.m. All board meetings are held at Town Hall unless otherwise indicated. Our next meeting is January 23rd.
And then we're well into February. I think it's the 13th is the meeting after that.
Okay. so then we've got the ongoing items. We've gotten, well, we're going to have Lunenburg Municipal Buildings, Michael Ray Jeffries is going to be back next meeting. So on top of the common driveways, no, not common driveways, I said the wrong
Yeah.
thing. Yeah, driveways and entrances.
But it's essentially for the common
Specifically
driveways.
for. But I mean, if you're reading 250, and you see something else that's not common driveways that jumps out at you, please bring it up. So we've got those two things in the continuation of our hearing.
And I have an update on the MBTA communities. We've received our action plan draft from MRPC. I'm in the process of reviewing it. After I've made my notes and reviewed it, I'll send it to you folks. It's due at the end of the month. We can talk about it at our next meeting, and I can make any changes and get it submitted before.
Our action plan?
Yeah, it's essentially just telling them how we plan to comply. It just buys us more time.
That's what it sounded like.
Yeah.
So this is an unfunded mandate, very similar to others that we've gotten from the state. And it's not actually a mandate. It's
a law.
It's mostly stick with a little bit of carrot. No,
No, there's no carrot.
We get their
Undying
we
love.
get to apply for certain things, whereas if we didn't, right?
But that's just more stick.
Okay.
It's just like the littler stick.
A lot of stick.
So in about a year ago, the legislature passed a law that said that any MBTA community, so anyone that has a bus station, a train station, commuter rail station, or is next to any of those communities, is considered an MBTA community. So we happen to be next to several of those, so we become an MBTA community. Needs to have a district that is a minimum of 50 acres that allows by right development of multifamily housing at a density of 15 units per acre.
Okay.
Just over twice our maximum density right now.
So our maximum density in town is Emerald Place, and that's 8 units an acre.
Gotcha.
So they're requiring us, and so as you can imagine, there was some good old-fashioned hippie freakouts going on from Arlington to Lunenburg. And so they went back and they took what everybody said and they really dialed it back a little bit, but most specifically they dialed it back for adjacent communities, which was good for us.
Okay.
Because we were going to be required to be able to create, not to actually create, but to have the zoning that would allow it to create up to a minimum of 750 units. And so they've now dialed it back to, I think it's 5% of your total housing units. So that gets us into the 250 range. And they have taken, I think, the max, or the minimum acreage down a little bit, and they've extended a year for us to comply with this.
Okay.
So we've kind of won on this. And there is some consideration, I have to follow up with Karen Chapman from MRPC on this, but we have a 40R district down at Tri-Town, and that may qualify for a portion of our units, and that's 200 units. So we'd be looking at, trying to have a space to create 50 more units, give or take. And so that would be like hooray. But so you'll get more in the weeds on this as we go along.
Sure.
In the next year, 18 months.
Do I remember correctly that if we do not comply, the penalty is we cannot receive certain grants?
Correct, yeah.
But that is the only penalty, correct?
They have not been particularly clear or pleasant about that. And I don't know what will happen with a new administration and a new secretariat across the board. I will go on record as saying I was not a particular fan of the Secretary of Energy and Environmental Affairs previously. And, I asked the same question, what if we do a cost-benefit analysis and we realize that we don't get those grants anyway, so it's better for us to just thumb our nose at you. And his answer was, it says you shall do it. So it really comes down to what the state chooses to do as far as enforcement for that portion of the general laws. Mass Works is kind of a big one. We don't currently get a lot of that money, but when you want it, it's really helpful to get. And it has a wide variety of things that are really public works related that, as the town grows, will become more important, especially from what used to be the PWED program, the Public Works Economic Development. And it's usually infrastructure that sets the stage to allow for growth of your commercial industrial sector. And something like Leominster Shirley Road would be ripe for that. And it would be, really helpful and could provide, a significant chunk of change to make that area really ready for some development. Not that it's on the table right now, but, it would be in our benefit.
All right. Zoning changes to manage growth. I haven't been able to get anywhere with that.
And I think we talked about the public process for the master plan being a good table-setting exercise for that. And in our master plan RFP, we included a request for a review of our zoning and how we could change it or monitor it or magnify growth through zoning, especially in an economic development context. And I think that's some of what that section is looking at.
Okay. Then I guess you can clean that up.
Yeah, this whole thing can be cleaned up a little bit. The Northfield Road and the Parks Commission, that was the request from the Parks Commission. So, Mr. Wilsmer, I don't know if you're aware of this. Up behind Walmart, there's three large parcels.
Yes.
One of which is under agreement between the current property owner and an agricultural company from Canada.
And this is the discussion about whether the entryways go
Correct.
on Northfield
Yes.
Road
Yeah.
or Chase.
And no, they wanted, so this company, Lufa Farms from Canada, is going to build an indoor agricultural grow and greenhouse on that site. And they're going to access through the Mass Ave entrance for Walmart in Hannaford. They're in negotiations with Brixmore to get an access easement. Everything looks positive. There was a lettuce factory or lettuce grow approved there previously that had done the same thing, so they're looking to build off of that access agreement. The Parks Commission came and requested that we make a request of these individuals that they grant an easement to the town to access that parcel over that land to reduce traffic on Northfield Road.
Yes.
We did make that request to them. They came and did a technical review with town staff. They had some reasonable concerns about food security and liability. So they're still exploring it. It's not looking super rosy, but it's something that they are at least considering.
All right, that pretty much rounds us out.
Lots of public for comment.
Yeah, public comment? Anybody? Board comment, concerns? All right. Anything else? Nothing. Okay. I guess I'd take a motion.
I would move to adjourn.
Seconded.
There you go, Peter. All in favor of adjourning by roll call. Mrs. Reed?
Aye.
Mr. Brenner?
Aye.
Mr. Wilsmer?
Aye.
And an aye for myself. Thank you, folks.